It's another Manly Monday, and you'll have to excuse me this Manly Monday. Allergies are destroying me. It started Friday. I went out, and then I went to visit a friend. We went out for an early dinner, but yeah, I was outside, and I woke up this morning, and my throat is. I've woken up the last 3 days with a sore throat that gradually goes away throughout the day, but today's the absolute worst of the three. The antihistamines are helping, but they're not taking it away. It's friggin' brutal. But the show must go on. And we're talking about the unique issues with men and the mental health system. We've been talking a lot about abuse and surviving abuse. And I thought, and then Song and I recorded another two women talking over the weekend, and I kept, catching myself because we were talking about, the different types of people that we are, the tomboy girly girl thing, and the different challenges and the different ways you're rejected because of that. And I kept catching myself going, yes, men get it too, but this is two women talking. Manly Monday is for men stuff. And I know I'm still going to get comments that men get it too, men get it too. You're only talking about women. Because it's this reaction to trauma. And one of the reasons I was so hesitant to do men's content, and one of the reasons that I keep doing it despite the shit I get from people, is that the system does, hi Scout, the language is very feminized. The processes are very feminized, which you might think is odd considering, Freud and all the garbage in Freud, but more modern types of cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as dialectical behavior therapy particularly, were developed by women, and the materials have not been specialized for men. And that's probably because women are much more likely than men to seek out therapy, so it makes sense, tailoring your materials to your primary audience. But now we get a reinforcing spiral because it's a uniquely demeaning process for men, because emasculation is a big part of it. And here we are with this video. So if you'd like to support these efforts, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. Six people need services. More on the men's groups that we're working on starting up when we figure out what the fuck we're doing. There's gonna be some polling regarding times and stuff, because different men have different needs, and much like women are put on this hierarchy, men are put on this hierarchy. If I would love it if we could get rid of this whole alpha male thing. And this is where guys jump on me going, but it's true. You're taking animal behavior and applying it to humans. And humans are much more complex, but also you're getting the animal behavior wrong. It's the beta male that does all the fighting. The alpha male is the most successful dad in the group of animals. Look it up. It's true. But that makes you wonder why the myth of what being an alpha means took off the way it did. Well, there are a lot of different reasons, but that men too, get out of men's spaces, yeah, rah, rah, lunge, 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 growl, growl. That's pretty typical beta male behavior. according to actual science. But beta male's an insult, right? And the problem with this whole thing and the way things are treated by the mental health system is that aggression has been so demonized that a lot of men get stuck because the first reaction to pain for a lot of people comes across as aggression. I am one of them. This is something that has bitten me my entire life. I've been listening to Pearl Jam's 10 album a lot lately. The song Jeremy. Like, I relate to that friggin' song. But they just see violent kids as a problem and they try to, de-violence the kid instead of going, what is going on underneath all that? And the problem is too many young men get in trouble with the system and end up with criminal records, and that's the first time they're offered any help, or people only intervene after the first disastrous relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the guy's fault the relationship fell apart. A lot of men come into adulthood with massive trust issues. And, working with a predominantly male client base, it's pretty obvious why. There's this narrative that if somebody took advantage of you, you should have seen it and you should have prevented it. And there's this shame that, somebody got to you. And I had to work through that myself. But I know if I were more typically female, it would have been a lot easier for me. The wild stuff that various, less trauma-informed therapists threw at me. I can only imagine what men get. And, I don't think that a system that coddles, so to speak, helps women. It keeps them stuck in a different way. But I remember when I did that 4-part series on video game technology and PTSD treatments for The Escapist back in the day, the pitch from the group doing the VR game module build for war veterans, the pitch was perfect. They said it's hard medicine for a hard problem. And that's the way you get men to try the treatment without feeling like they're weak, right? Oh, it's hard. Okay. And that doesn't work at all on typical women. That's the approach that worked for me when it was all the safe spaces and the fucking bells on, I don't know if I talked about this. I went to this one place where it's like they put a bell on an elastic on your wrist, and every time you start to feel bad, you snap the band to ring the bell and think, I am a prince or a princess. And I got the stink eye when I asked, do we get to choose which one we are? And, immediately, some of the others there laughed, but I threw the damn bell in the garbage the minute I got it. I was like, what the fuck is this? First of all, I'm going to seem like a crazy person with a damn bell on my wrist. What, am I appropriating like classical Indian dance? Like, what the fuck? Like, but also, what is this? No, this doesn't solve the problem. This doesn't do anything about how angry I am at all the years that I lost to abuse. And that anger has to be felt to heal. The problem is the minute the anger starts coming out, there's this horrible reaction and it pushes it back down again. And it, the feeling of when you finally decide to get back up, when you finally decide to try, it's like you come out of the depression and then there is just this like no man's land of anger, like white hot anger that you have to get through before things regulate. But, every time you try, you get this horrible reaction from people and you get pushed back down to the depression again. And dealing with an angry person is not easy, right? And there are certain boundaries and limits that must hold. Aggression is one thing, anger is one thing. Violence or false accusations, no, not okay. And that was a skill I had to learn. I had to recognize, I had to learn how to be angry, but not out of control. And unfortunately, a lot of quote unquote anger management programs, not all of them, there are some good ones, but they teach people how to diffuse anger faster, which is good. But they don't teach you how to behave when you are angry and cannot get that space. I have multiple clients that have problems with loved ones because they need to step away so that they don't do something they can't take back and the other person feels abandoned. Now, there are things you can do to mitigate that and still get the space, right? You can say, look, I need 10 minutes or I need 15 minutes. When you set a time limit on it, a person knows that it's not forever. But the other person in a relationship is not a perfected being either, right? Everybody's got some damage. And unfortunately, so many systems either treat the client or the patient as a problem that needs to be fixed, and you have to know, your entire view of the world is disordered and we have to fix your thinking. And that's a form of gaslighting. Somebody with trauma isn't divorced from reality. The perception of things come from somewhere. Something I say to clients a lot is, congratulations, your brain is working the way it's intended to. The problem is you've been taught systems and you're in environments that are keeping you stuck and pushing you down. They're not helping you. At one point, those skills, those ways of navigating the world, they were put in for a reason. They were there to survive childhood, teenage years, and perhaps even your 20s. Getting through college, oh my God, the expectations of college are so unhealthy. So unhealthy. More and more, I'm starting to think everything about post-secondary education is like the opposite of what we should be doing. And so you hit your mid-20s to early 30s, realize, okay, you've got all these achievements under your belt, you've got a degree, you've got a job, but you're a fucking disaster under the hood, right? And then it's like, now what? Yeah, you got to relearn a bunch of things. And I say to people, until you're about 25 to 28 years old, your life is a series of sprints. So you can exhaust yourself and collapse, and that's optimal for semestered schooling, midterms and finals. And, then there's the catharsis, binge drinking, and all that stuff. And the problem is, once you get into adulthood, all of that fails, right? I know some schools go year round now, but when I was in school, it was, you exhaust yourself during the school year, and then you'd have a couple of months to sort of get your strength back until my parents forced me to get a job. Uh, and that's when I started really getting into trouble because I didn't have that recharge. And no one ever said, look, what can we do to help? It was always go to bed, get up, do this, sit, don't ignore your family. But I'm studying. Don't ignore your family. In this family, we sit at the table for dinner, but I have 4 hours of homework. Well, they shouldn't be giving that to you. But they did. What am I going to do about that? Well, this is the rules. And then it's get up when I was absolutely exhausted and go to bed, but I have 2 hours of homework left. Go to bed. It was always punitive. Always. It was never, how can we help? What's going on? I was taught that I was just an irritation and a disappointment. And I know in retrospect that wasn't what they were trying to do. They were worried and trying to motivate me into healthier habits, but it didn't work. That didn't convey. And that is another thing men encounter, right? The social messaging, the politicized social messaging, that intents don't matter, only the way the message is received matters. Except you, white, straight, cisgendered guy. That's a problem. Because when you teach a person that neither their intents nor their reactions to things matter, you dehumanize them. You depersonalize them. Then they go on to treat others the way they understand you're supposed to treat people, which is my intents don't matter, my reactions don't matter, my side of this doesn't matter, so you know what? Nobody's does. I'm not going to care about anybody else because if my side doesn't matter, why should I care about anybody else? And that's totally logical. And that's how we lose guys to the manosphere. Because if you look at all the messaging from the manosphere, it's they don't care about you. Life is suffering. Just accept it. Happiness isn't possible. Only purpose and duty will give you any sense of fulfillment. And that's not true. That's just doing, the give yourself over to a higher power. It works in the short term. That's an Alcoholics Anonymous thing. And I know Alcoholics Anonymous has worked for them. If you're a person of faith, that's great. If you're not, that submission right at the beginning is an insurmountable barrier. Because that's what, happens in these men's manosphere groups too. Be tough, hustle, don't be a loser. It's just getting the hooks in via the negative self-talk. And the truth is not only the way to be happier, but also more successful, is to do the opposite of that. To focus on what you're good at and what your strengths are. And use that to build a sense of self and a social network and an environment that is validating, because it's a lot easier to hear tough stuff. It's a lot easier to take feedback that is critical when you have that solid foundation and your brain doesn't immediately go to I'm worthless every time someone criticizes you. And again, yes, women get this too. This is Manly Monday. That's what Two Women Talking's for. So many guys are so profoundly invalidated when they get to the point where a lot of the time they're sort of forced into therapy under duress because they're trying to save a relationship, or they lost their job, or they realize they have a problem with drugs or alcohol, you know, they got arrested. And the process is, once again, you're the problem, you're doing everything wrong, you need to make all these changes. And when someone's traumatized, when someone's invalidated and gaslit, the first thing you have to do is establish a reality that someone cannot take from them. And so many men are denied that. You know, we send messages at women that your pain is real, your trauma is real, what happened to you is real, even if no one believes you. We have those structures set up in place. Meanwhile, the so-called manosphere is, don't be a loser, get tougher. Don't expect happiness. It's a lie. Like, that's awful. And in the short term, it's very reassuring. It's very reassuring because it's not your fault you're not happy. It's not possible. You know, yes, I am a loser, but this guy's going to show me how not to be. And the worst advice somebody can give you is find someone that's successful, find out what they did, do it. Yes, that's Andrew Tate. It's terrible advice. I tried that multiple times. It doesn't work. You know why? Because you're not that person. You don't necessarily have the same aptitudes. You don't necessarily have the same personality type. You don't necessarily have the same skills or types of resilience that allowed them to take that path. You have to create a path based on who you are and what you want, not mimicking somebody who's already done it. Because why? That somebody already exists. That space is filled. And if you're just trying to emulate somebody else, you're not playing to your own strengths. You're not being your best self. And that will not lead to success. Certain things here and there you can pick up, but you have to adapt that to you. When you hear make it your own, that's what it means. Because, you know, everybody said you got to fight and you got to not let anybody get an inch in. You have to fight. You have to defend yourself. And that's how I started off. And it was dead wrong. You know, I talk about all the time. You guys taught me. People want to see someone who can take a punch, so to speak, right? Now, unfortunately, the problem with that is that other women see me go, all right. That happened. But I'm not going to play in kind. They think, I can't do it. I'm not that strong. I'm never going to make a YouTube video. It's too scary. Look, all you do is get attacked. And I can't tell them it's not that bad. Right? But I think a lot of guys, too, the reason so many guys react to, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That shouldn't happen to anybody. Yes, shouldn't happen to anybody. And yet, guys think they have to take it and say, I'm so sorry when it happens to a woman. Why aren't we saying, I'm so sorry that happened to you to more men? Because that's the first bit of the process. It takes a while when I start working with someone. Because, you know, if you say, well, you have trauma, that's not up to me, right? I do say, as a point of due diligence on my part, I need to screen for potential trauma. But it's up to the individual whether they want to call it that on any point. And too often, men are subjected to external labels. Women are too, but again, it's Manly Monday. Because of the idea that, you know, men are physically bigger, physically stronger, or this, that, and the next thing. a whole bunch of stuff that in our modern world with all the technology, let's face it, there are some places that still matters. Not as many as it used to be, right? Emotional resilience and mental resilience is so much more important, and nobody's getting taught that. Women are taught to hide away from the world and never make a mistake in public, never fail in public, because then you're awful, you're a complete failure. Men are taught that you're supposed to just be this unending, resilient receptacle for punishment, and neither is healthy. And so the first step I find that's the most effective is working with a guy to find out, what are you good at? What can we reset to when something doesn't go the way we hoped, right? Because those small wins, that rebuilding, that's what it's about. We try things. We set appropriate expectations for, all right, it may not work out, but is that big a deal? No. What's the worst that can happen? Is that not that bad? Can you handle that? Yep. Okay. But it makes it way easier to say, look, you're a caring person. You're a considerate person. Here's proof. Like, you did that. That's real. Nobody can take that from you. Even if people can't see it, I do. And we don't do that with men and boys nearly enough, because everybody seems to wait for the other person to be vulnerable first. And I'm not like that. And I learned last week that there's a challenge there, because a lot of men, when they're young, get abused by people that are telling them they're doing it for their own good. They're being nice. They're being kind. This will make it easier in the world. And these people seem so sweet, but did some things that were really not okay. And so whenever someone is nice for no reason, the barriers go up. And I said to one guy last week, it's like, oh, that's why you were so when I did that early on. All right. And I said, thank you for trusting me. That's really important, because, as peer counselors, as coaches, we have to model the behavior that we want our clients to do. And similarly, one thing I absolutely will not tolerate, and this is not across the board, this is my methods and my process. I will not tolerate accusations without evidence, and I will not tolerate, attacks. It's one thing, because I want, especially after a certain point, people get warnings, people get chances, but there's a certain point where if there's too many of those, you did this and you did this and you think I'm this, it's like, no, we don't do that, because that is the negative self-talk bubbling over and coming out. And that's precisely the thing where those wires need to get cut and new wires need to be restrung. Because that's your abuser's voice coming out through you. That's the abuse you suffered coming back out, because the abuser convinced you that's the way of the world. I know, because I was there. And that early period where you have to be vulnerable and you have to not hit back, and you have to go, okay, I'm going to give you that one. I'm not going to respond in kind, but I'm going to see that for what it is. And then when someone's being cruel, don't respond in kind. Respond You can be compassionate and still be a hard ass. And that was a really hard thing to muck out on my own. Because I had to accept I am a hard ass, in an upcoming Two Women Talking. I tell Songa, not one of my proudest moments, but it was a hard ass moment. She goes, yeah, based on what I know of you, that sounds like you. But I was always punished for that growing up. And so to accept it in myself because it's authentic and make it work for me, that was a real challenge. But the thing is, because I went through it on my own, I want better for people who don't have the typical, you know, therapy Twitter makes jokes about the cardigans, but the typical, friendship is magic, awesome cartoon, but don't necessarily have that style or want to develop it in a way that doesn't make them feel bad, vulnerable, or weak. I can't necessarily tell you exactly how to do it. I can support you as somebody who's been there through it and be there to make the failed experiments in figuring it out seem okay. And that, I think, is the thing a lot of men need and don't have, because male socialization tends to form around common activities, and men don't admit they're not doing well because they don't want to, quote unquote, ruin everyone's fun. And, working with men has been really, really humbling, but also really rewarding. Because with my own past and some shitty experiences, I see a much better side of, the male of the species. I'd love more experience like that with women. And I love my female clients. They're awesome. And my female collaborators, woman collaborators. Let's not use, anatomical language. But, yeah, that's where the system is uniquely letting men down. It's letting women down in the coddling and keeping them stuck, but that's the big, like, fundamental fault right at the beginning that happens with men, which is why we're trying to, create services and groups and all that stuff. It's just a question of raising the money to do it now, which is coming. But, really looking forward to your thoughts on this. Not sexy for the YouTube algorithm, but I know people really appreciate these videos. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching Manly Mondays.